Today is World Read Aloud Day, and I'm reading from Michael Anthony's collection of short stories called Cricket in the Road. This is a story called Enchanted Alley. Leaving for school early on mornings, I walked slowly through the busy parts of the town. The business places would all be opening then, and smells of strange fragrance would fill the high street. Inside the opening doors, I would see clerks dusting, arranging, hanging things up, getting ready for the day's business. They looked cheerful and eager, and they opened the doors very wide. Sometimes I stood up to watch them. In places between the stores, several little alleys ran off the high street. Some were busy and some were not, and there was one that was long and narrow and dark and very strange. Here, too, the shops would be opening as I passed, and there would be bearded Indians in loincloths spreading rugs on the pavement. There would be Indian women also, with veils thrown over their shoulders, setting up their stalls and chatting in a strange, sweet tongue. Often I stood, too, watching them and taking in the fragrance of rugs and spices and onions and sweetmeats. And sometimes, suddenly remembering, I would hurry away for fear the school bell would ring. In class, long after I settled down, the thoughts of this alley would return to me. I would recall certain stalls and certain beards and certain flashing eyes, and even some of the rugs that had been rolled out. The Indian women, too, with bracelets around their ankles and around their sun-browned arms, flashed to my mind. I thought of them. I saw them again looking shyly at me from under the shadow of the stores, their veils half hiding their faces. In my mind, I could almost picture them laughing together and talking in that strange, sweet tongue. And mostly the day would be quite old before the spell of the alley wore off my mind. One morning, I was much too early for school. I passed street sweepers at work on Harris's Promenade, and when I came to the high street, only one or two shop doors were open. I walked slowly, looking at the quietness and noticing some of the alleys that ran away to the backs of fences and walls and distant streets. I looked at the names of those alleys. Some were funny, and I walked on anxiously so I could look a little longer at the dark, funny street. As I walked, it struck me that I did not know the name of that street. I laughed at myself. Always I had stood there looking at it, and I did not know the name of it. As I drew near, I kept my eyes on the wall of the corner shop. There was no sign on the wall. On getting there, I looked at the other wall. There was a sign plate upon it, but the dust had gathered thickly there, and whatever the sign said was hidden behind the dust. I was disappointed. I looked along the alley, which was now beginning to get alive, and as the shop doors opened, the enchantment of spices and onions and sweetmeats emerged. I looked at the wall again, but there was nothing there to say what the street was called. Straining my eyes at the sign plate, I could make out a C and an A, but farther along the dust had made one smooth surface of the plate and the wall. "Stoops," I said in disgust. I heard mild laughter, and as I looked before me, I saw the man rolling out his rugs. There were two women beside him, and they were talking together, and they were laughing, and I could see the women were pretending not to look at me. They were setting up a stall of sweetmeats, and the man put down his rugs and took out something from a tray and put it into his mouth, looking back at me. Then they talked again in a strange tongue and laughed. I stood there a while. I knew they were talking about me. I was not afraid. I wanted to show them that I was not timid and that I would not run away. I moved a step or two nearer the wall. The smells rose up stronger now, and they seemed to give the feelings of things splendid and far away. I pretended I was looking at the wall, but I stole glances at the merchants from the corners of my eyes. I watched the men in their loincloths, and the garments of the women were full and many-colored and very exciting. The women stole glances at me and smiled to each other and ate the sweetmeats they sold. The rug merchant spread out his rugs wide on the pavement, and he looked at the beauty of their colors and seemed very proud. He too looked slyly at me. I drew a little nearer because I was not afraid of them. There were many more stalls now under the stores. Some of the people turned off the high street and came into this little alley, and they bought little things from the merchants. The merchants held up the bales of cloth and matched them on the people's clothes, and I could see they were saying it looked very nice. I smiled at this, and the man with the rug saw me and smiled. That made me brave. I thought of the word I knew in the strange tongue, and then I remembered it as I drew nearer. Salam, I said. The rug merchant laughed aloud, and the two women laughed aloud, and I laughed too. Then the merchant bowed low to me and replied, Salam. That was very amusing for the two women. They talked together so I couldn't understand, and then the fat one spoke. What wrong with the world? I was puzzled for a moment, and then I said, Oh, it is a street sign. Dust cover it. Street sign, one said, and they covered their laughter with their veils. I can't read what street it is, I said. What street this is? The rug merchant spoke to the women in the strange tongue, and the three of them giggled, and one of the women said, Every morning you stand up there and you don't know what they call here? First time I came down here, I said. Yes, said the fat woman. Her face was big and friendly, and she sat squat on the pavement. First time you walk down here, but every morning you stop there and watch we. I laughed. You see he laughing, said the other. The rug merchant did not say anything, but he was very amused. What you call this street? I said. I felt very brave because I knew they were friendly to me, and I looked at the stalls, and the smell of the sweetmeats was delicious. There was bara too, and chutney, and dry chana, and in the square tin there was the wet yellow chana, still hot, the steam curling up from it. The man took time to put down his rugs, and then he spoke to me. This, he said, talking slowly and making actions with his arms. From up there to up there is Calcutta Street. He was very pleased with his explanation. He had pointed from the high street end of the alley to the other end that ran darkly into this distance. The whole street was very long and dusty, and in the concrete drain there was no water, and the brown peel of onions blew about when there was a little wind. Sometimes there was the smell of cloves in the air, and sometimes the smell of oilcloth. But where I stood, the smell of the sweetmeats was strongest and most delicious. He asked, You like Calcutta Street? Yes, I said. The two women laughed coyly, and I looked down from one to the other. I have to go, I said. School. Oh, you going to school, the man said. He put down his rugs again. His loincloth was very tight around him. Well, you could work so, he said, pointing away from the high street end of the alley. And when you get up there, turn so, and when you walk and walk, you'll meet the school. Oh, I said, surprised. I didn't know there was a way to school along this alley. You see, he said, very pleased with himself. Yes, I said. The two women looked at him smiling, and they seemed very proud the way he explained. I moved off to go, holding my books under my arm. The women looked at me, and they smiled in a sad, friendly way. I looked at the chutney and bara and chana, and suddenly something occurred to me. I felt in my pockets, and then I opened my books and looked among the pages. I heard one of the women whisper, Taking learning? The other said, Aha, and I did not hear the rest of what she said. Desperately, I turned the book down and shook them, and the penny fell out rolling on the pavement. I grabbed it up and turned to the fat woman. For a moment, I couldn't decide which, but the delicious smell of the yellow wet chana softened my heart. A penny chana, I said, wet. The woman bent over the big spoon, took out a small paper bag, flapped it open, then crammed 2 or 3 spoonfuls of chana into it. Then she took up the pepper bottle. Pepper? Yes, I said anxiously. Plenty? Plenty. The fat woman laughed, pouring the pepper sauce with 2 or 3 pieces of red pepper skin falling on the chana. Good, I said, licking my lips. You see, said the other woman. She grinned widely, her gold teeth glittering in her mouth. You see, he liked plenty pepper. Ah, I handed my penny. I saw the long As I handed my penny, I saw the long brown fingers of the rug merchant stretching over my head. He handed a penny to the fat lady. "Keep your penny in your pocket," he grinned at me, "and look out. You go reach to school late." I was very grateful about the penny. I slipped it into my pocket. "You could walk so," the man said, pointing up Calcutta Street, "and turn so, and you'll come down by the school." "Yes," I said, hurrying off. The street was alive with people now. There were many more merchants with rugs and many more stalls of sweetmeats and other things. I saw bales of bright cloth matched up to ladies' dresses, and I heard the ladies laugh and say it was good. I walked fast through this crowd. There were women with saris calling out, "Ground nuts, paratha," and every here and there gramophones blared out Indian songs. I walked on with my heart full inside me. Sometimes I stood up to listen, and then I walked on again. Then suddenly it came home to me. It must be very late. The crowd was thick, and the din spread right along Calcutta Street. I looked back to wave to my friends. They were far behind, and the pavement was so crowded I could not see. I heard the car, the horns tooting, and I knew that on the high street it must be a jam session of traffic and people. It must be very late. I held my books in my hands, secured the paper bag of chana in my pocket, and with the warmth against my leg, let me do that line again. It must be very late. I held my books in my hands, secured the paper bag of chana in my pocket, and with the warmth against my legs, I ran pell-mell to school.